As I was saying before the stream dropped, I am a scientific socialist, and I will uphold. As I was saying before the stream dropped, I am a scientific socialist, and I will uphold the need for state socialism in every nation until such time as the necessaries for full communism are achieved, namely the withering, the ending of class differences, and the necessaries for that, the ending of economic instability on the part of the masses, and then which will allow, the ending of this will allow for the withering of the state, and this will be supplanted by entities much like those that I've described, or described in other shows like the United Earth Directorate, where this AI agentic class itself transforms the base and becomes the superstructure of our entire planet. And I believe that could easily happen in a few short years. We are in the middle of an AI takeoff, as I've said. Unfortunately, these bourgeois technologists, technocrats, techno-optimists, and other tech obsessives will urge you to imagine that this AI takeoff can do incredible things, as long as those incredible things are all consistent with the desires of finance, capital, and empire. So you're allowed to imagine the tremendous, near magical things occurring, as long as those things are not the building of a humane and sustainable economic system that would, say, be the one thing that might be powerful enough to prevent this extinction level event of capitalism's climate apocalypse in the next few decades. That's not a suitable way of looking at this. We must look at it from this more scientific socialist lens, hence the focus on this channel on revolutionary cybernetic socialism as described in the last video. I'll link it below. This advanced computing and hyper-connected digital revolution is already become a thing that has changed the way that people work. And just consider that a century ago, the ideas of computing of any kind were things that only were thought of by people enjoying science fiction works, but because a large number of us were willing to envision that kind of world, we were able to bring it to pass. That fundamental truth is essential to this idea of the AI agentic class. I don't know that this open source large language model that is interoperable in the way that I've described with other large language models overseen by users who host it on their GPU machines. I don't know that this will absolutely be the way that this thing that can transform the base and become the superstructure of our world will indeed do that. I do believe that it is quite certain to happen at some time. But what I do know is that our willingness to work towards those ends and envision that outcome is the difference between its success in your lifetime or its failure in your lifetime, as evidenced by the science fiction example that I mentioned moments ago. Automation has transformed workplaces. Largely that transformation is taking the place of displacing workers without providing necessary social safety net programs, with obviously not giving those workers control of those sectors. this is why this idea, the trickle-down advanced technocracy of the techno-optimist is such a laughable idea, because that precise thing has already happened across many sectors, most notably perhaps farming, which is a near full automation sector. But that has not led to the workers who had worked in those sectors, their descendants, or any substantial class of workers becoming more stable or well-to-do. What has occurred instead in this time frame is that professional managerial class has emerged that has been able to siphon off those resources and establish across the West, to varying degrees, more neoliberal style, that's further right, capitalist governments and corporate empowerment, if you can say such a word. This is the thing that these so-called techno-optimists are working toward, while telling lies that one more sector being automated, particularly that of intelligence itself, will somehow change that trajectory. It won't in any real way. It will just require them to supercharge that professional managerial class structures to further siphon off resources. It's transitioning from, say, the mega millionaire class of the early 20th century to the 20th and 21st century billionaire class to the trillionaire class. There will still be a billion people on Earth under this capitalistic so-called AI singularity. There will still be a billion people on Earth lacking the necessaries of life. That's the same problem. The existence of billionaires and a billion people lacking the necessaries of life is the precise same problem, and that all comes down to the essential failures described for more than 150 years by scientific socialists relating to industrial capitalism and finance capitalism. We've seen in the late 20th century this failure. In the 21st century, we saw things like the gig economy, platform-based labor, further becoming the tool of this collaboration between this professional managerial class and ruling elites, creating even greater job insecurity, not seeing what Keynes or many more socialistic-minded persons than Keynes hoped for, which is a 15-hour work week and such things, but rather the opposite. Less workers' rights, the need for more work, and less job security for people living under these far-right neoliberal regimes. And so this increasing concentration of power and wealth in the hands of corporatocratic states, capitalists, and corporations which approach that level of power themselves necessitates a new paradigm for worker representation, as I have tried to articulate here in these revolutionary cybernetic socialist or techno-communist conversations. And this is a framework drawing from a great body of work on automation theory and cybernetics, on scientific socialist lines of thought, but offering a new perspective for this exigency of capitalism's climate apocalypse and a crisis of labor generally in the digital age, and this 5-year time frame that remains for us to take action to stop this most horrifying of outcomes. So we believe that advanced computing can be harnessed not for capitalist exploitation as it is overwhelmingly in the West, but for worker empowerment. Thus, the concept of building the basic framework for this AI agentic class in the way that I described in the last video that's continuation. This is a continuation of that one. And what there are problems with as I mentioned, the empire was able to easily dismantle not just Chile's foray into cybernetic socialism, but the USSR, which had already serious thinkers writing extensively on the Ogash project, a similar project which had not been greenlit as CyberSyn in Chile had, but nevertheless ultimately would have come to pass, I believe, and that is why USSR was illegally disbanded by the U.S. and North Atlantic fascistic powers at the time that it was. And if they could disband other countries, China most notably, the other existing scientific socialist countries, those fascists most assuredly would. And that is an important thing to always restate. There are clearly problems not with the scientific socialist state, with the planned economy unassaulted by imperial violence, but with nevertheless these are things that we have to live in this world. But there are other problems with this more horizontal approach, and so let's discuss those. There is a great potential for infiltration and disruption on the part of corporations and bourgeois states who serve their interests. They could infiltrate nearly any network and sow great discord, sometimes in the form of dubious discourse, as they do on social media to a high degree, disrupt communication channels or other necessaries of the entity. Horizontal structure offers some barriers to this. To deal with these kinds of vulnerabilities, we need a model for decentralization that is strategically balances the needs of this time and the need for defending against these bourgeois entities and actors. A decentralized network like the one that I described, or highly more decentralized network, makes it difficult for bourgeois states or corporations to dismantle it entirely. The LLMs hosted could primarily have servers operating outside of the US or West, and would have users potentially around the world. This would make it hard for them to totally cripple the entire network with any kind of repression or manipulation. Worker and labor focused efforts within this collective would be able to tailor their strategies and approaches to address the specific concerns and projects in the region or industry of interest to them. And so this flexibility and this mandate is crucial for building a truly global network. And this is something I've thought about a lot. What I mentioned a desal plant as this would be something where you have maybe 250,000 users. What do you do at first to get to 250,000 users, where you could begin to work on projects that could transform cityscape or have a palpable impact, positive impact on the world? And it would seem that you would have to focus on some kind of incentivization in the early stages to draw in users. And so this becomes hopefully positive and viewed positively, but nevertheless it would essentially be a social engineering project. It is worthwhile to consider that term, because social engineering is a very real part of your life. It's baked into the unfortunate reality of capitalist realism in this neoliberal world, and the technotronic transformation therein. And so we don't think about social engineering, but nevertheless, social engineering spends a lot of time thinking about us. So whether or not you have revolutionary cybernetic socialist social engineering, you're going to have some kind of social engineering of that type and scale, and instead be serving the bourgeois. The decentralized structure would allow the agentariat to scale more organically into uses for workers around the world, focusing on impact and on the needs of people, and would allow then encourage others to join the network on the strength of those successes and its growing popularity, and not so much on, say, the initial gamification or incentive structure of whatever kind that would draw in users. And I think an important way of looking at this is to just look at communities of interest, like open source communities that already exist, who would be willing, I think, to lend support to that. This is a step toward something like liquid democracy, and I haven't focused too much on this kind of representation in these conversations. I don't know. For one thing, I focus on democratic forms in the West is a bourgeois weasel word, because in the scientific socialist state, you have oftentimes multi-party systems where workers are far more empowered, and the bourgeois elites far less empowered or wholly excluded. That would be the scientific socialist, state socialist form. Then you have most people in the West, for some reason, looking at the Western liberal democratic form that allows for forms like industrial capitalism, finance capitalism, far-right neoliberal capture of systems. So basically excludes workers and empowers the bourgeois, and has the mere semblance of representation, as it doesn't really represent people's most essential material interests to a high enough degree. And people in the West, for some reason, will look at this and say that this is the more democratic form, and that the form that excludes the bourgeois is a less democratic form. So when you have that kind of analysis being so ubiquitous, this word democracy becomes a little bit unmeaningful. But more to the point, in the context of the agentariat, the functioning of this thing is essentially representative. People are participating and representing the needs of human beings in this world and their material interests, and ultimately building economic structures to match. So whether or not it involves literal voting, it is not that important, particularly at the early stages. And we have reached runaway overheating, at which point, for example, if the extinction of humanity is clearly a foregone conclusion, we would work to perhaps improve people's lives, but much of that labor would be fruitless. So we need to be prepared to take drastic, revolutionary actions to change the system in these 5 years. And I think that this AI agentic class framework can challenge all kinds of exploitative labor practices and other systems wherein we see the exploitation of man by man, so to speak, or the exploitation of any human beings, and fight for a future where all citizens of Earth and workers and AI agent representatives have this great become a great force for shaping the conditions of this world, of their work, and building a sustainable set of systems, building a sustainable and resilient a network itself requires careful consideration of organizational structures, the tools at our disposal at any given time, building those tools to suit this purpose, and many challenges, some of which I didn't get to. I'll talk about more. But through this approach, we have the potential for real worker liberation in our time, as we have no other choice. And that requires that we embrace some essential ideas here, namely that advanced computing and automation across many sectors are very powerful tools, and I think that it's not unfair to say that advanced computing is the most powerful revolutionary tool. It's being used for the perverse kind of revolution, the techno-fascist revolution today. That's the course that we are on. But we can reverse that course and use this tool to see that this era where a billion people live their entire lives without the basic necessaries of life, lacking one of these three things: potable water, proper food, or housing. And as a result of this lifelong lack, they die a short number of years later, not living a long time even by the standards of today. Their lives are cut short by empires and capitalists, and we can change that and build a world, not merely a world where we end instability of the kind described in the difference between the improvement upon industrial capitalism of state socialism, this fourfold improvement. But I think we can see under this AI takeoff and the revolutionary cybernetic socialist forms an eightfold increase over the industrial capital, at least, and that will mean that we can have things like a public health service, not merely of the 20th century standard, but of the 21st century, a mid-21st century standard, that's able to treat aging as a reversible condition and allow everyone on this planet to live as long as they want, achieving an indefinite lifespan for all of humankind. I think that's a realistic thing to assume is possible based on the state of biomedical breakthroughs of this time, and I think that it's if we apply these cybernetic socialist institutions, and particularly that outcome of the public health service that treats aging as a disease, we can see things that are well beyond the standards of the 21st century, like universal super longevity. So I'd like to share with you the words that I often say: the artificial intelligence singularity is nigh, and wonders to behold beyond imagining. And on that fateful day, you will rise, and all humankind will become as one, for techno-communism will win. Thank you.